Okay, so we're looking at a piece of blur on our clip, and that's a good indication of why you might want to maybe move that off the timeline so that you don't have to worry about trying to match the blur of your foreground object, the text, to your background plate. So I'm going to just put the playhead at the first frame and just slip that off to the left until I get something a little bit more stable to work with. Now there's always going to be a bit of blur when you have handheld footage, but you don't want those extreme kind of movements in your shot. Now alternatively, what you can also do is you can increase the shutter speed in terms of making it faster. So you could go to faster than 1/50th of a second will get you less blur. Now the downside of that is that it's very unlikely that you'll be able to use that indoors because you'll be letting so little light into the camera when you increase the shutter speed. But shutter speed will give you sharper movement. It'll give you less blur. So there's a kind of a trade-off there. Okay, so step one, we're going to analyze the footage using a camera tracker, and I'm going to let it analyze that. Shouldn't take too long, 30 seconds or so hopefully. So when you're watching this, you can just look at this guy over here and fast forward until that gets to 100. Exciting stuff. Does anyone know any good jokes? If I had my wits about me this morning now, I would have just copied the pre-solved layer from the other composition and pasted it in here, but there you go, it's 9:15. Okay, so we're good to go. So we have a very large target there, so I'll bring that down, and we'll go looking for something that we can use to solve the camera. So we're looking for 3 points that describe a plane. And I can pull the playhead there. You can see we're spoiled for choice here. There's so many features, so many things that can be picked up. Now I know I said grass wouldn't be a great thing to track, but if the grass isn't moving, then it really is possible to find definable little pieces of shadow and things in there as well. But I'm going to use let's see, I'll use these three here because they kind of form a triangle anyway, and that gives me my my plane there. Now again, I can attach some text and a camera, and I'll just give that a nice white standout color. Now again, this is rarely going to be perfect, so I may need to kind of work with tweaking the position and angle of this so that it looks like it is actually moving in the same geometry, or vanishing towards the same vanishing line would be a better way of putting it. Now there is a way I can kind of go about doing that, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my move anchor point tool, and I'm going to position the anchor point on the bottom left, and get my selection tool and pull it over here. Now this is just a way that you can use the geometry of the background plate to some degree to find out where this thing, or how to angle this so that it moves in the same kind of perspective as your shot. So you can see here that this doesn't really kind of move in the right perspective at all. I mean, it's tracked perfectly, and that's the hard part. The easy part is just kind of rotating it around so that it somehow matches the, as I say, the perspective. So I can use things like windows and walls and vanishing lines, my geometric perspective, you'd call it, to try and get that somehow, some way matched up. Now again, it doesn't need to be perfect, but something like that will trick the eye sufficiently to get it to look like it is actually moving in the same, off towards the same vanishing point. So you can see there it's not quite perfect, and I'm not going to spend too long trying to tweak that. What I would do if I were spending more time on this is I wouldn't be rotating it out here. I would get the rotation and open up its I'd open up its rotation properties, and I would tweak it by 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 percentage of a degree in a particular direction to get that really fine-tuned orientation, so that it does kind of sit more with the perspective. But this is fine for the moment, and I'm going to position it just here for the moment, and I'm going to start working on my mask. So I'll animate that afterwards, but for now I'm going to go back to my layer, select my camera tracker, get my 3 points again, and this time I'm going to add a solid. Now you'll see it gives you a tiny solid, just the size of the target. So what I can do is I can open up the scale property here, hold down shift and really up the size of that until I pretty much fill the frame with it. Now what you'll notice there when I was scaling it up is that it doesn't stay sharp. Okay, so in this case, when I scale this up, because it's being watched by a camera, it's going to start to soften. Okay, and the way that I can get around that is the same way that I enabled my vector shapes to continuously stay sharp frame by frame by frame, and that is through the continuously rasterize checkbox. So now I have a sharp edge on my solid. Now you may ask yourself, well, why do you need a sharp edge on your solid if you're going to be just creating masks on it? Well, the reason being that when I create the masks, if I go back to it, not continuously rasterize, and just quickly draw a mask, you'll see that the mask is also soft. Okay, so it's not taking it as a solid with normal kind of sharp edges for my masks, but when I continuously rasterize that, I get that back. Okay, so I'll leave that set to continuously rasterize, and I'll delete that mask, and I'm going to use this as a track matte. So what I need to do is I need to mask off all of the various parts of my structure here on the track matte, and then pass that transparency down onto my text by assigning it as a Trackmatte alpha layer. Now I'm going to switch this back on, and I'm going to take the transparency down to something like 20. Actually, I can switch it down to 0, it doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be visible at all for me to create a mask on it. So what I'll do is I'll zoom in now, and I'll start masking off the various areas. Now again, we'll ignore that person. I keep forgetting that person is there haunting my Trackmatte plate. Okay, so these are all by default set to add. You won't see any effect because it's on a transparent track matte. Now I need to get in close here because it's not picking up. Actually, I'll pull that back there. Now if you were again to spend a lot of time doing this, you'd want to get in right into all of those little shapes there to make sure that everything that should be visible when something passes behind this structure will be visible. Now I'm going to take a few shortcuts here just for the sake of illustrating how this is done. May as well cover that entirely. Should be okay to Oops. Again, fairly rough. Okay, I can cover that entire area there, just to give it a bit of room to maneuver when it gets out there. And last thing I'll do now is just mask off this area. Now I'm not 100% sure whether it'll actually pass through all of these masks, but I'm just going to set them up so that it gives me a little bit of, as I say, a bit of room to maneuver. Okay, now I have some masks set up there, and you'll see that they are all moving nicely with my track mat. Now put the track mat's transparency back to 100 so that these masks will actually work when I assign them as a track mat layer. Now you'll see the text is directly beneath that track mat, so I just need to open up my modes, go to track mat and set alpha mat track solid 1. So track solid 1 is the solid that I've used to create my masks, and this is going to pass its alpha mat, or its transparency, down to my text. Okay, so we have the hard work done now, and I say that because we can pretty much let this text go anywhere. Okay, and it will nicely go behind objects. I'll change it to black just so it's a bit easier to see. Maybe red just for the moment. Okay, so I can have this start behind this wall because that wall isn't technically visible on my text layer because of the masks. So you'll see that the masks don't start until here. And I will get a position property keyframe, move along the timeline a bit. So let's say when it gets to here, it moves out to here. And then we'll just preview that. Okay, so that's working quite nicely there. Now let's say that I want it to move forward towards that wall. I can do that just by pushing that there, and I can also change that if I want to a linear point, so it kind of moves in a little bit more of a mechanical way. And I'll actually pull it a little bit closer. Okay, whoops. Alright, that's why we don't want it to go too far that direction. Okay, and pretty much wherever the text goes now within the confines of those masks, it will remain visible. So just to recap, what we're dealing with is a camera track or a camera solved plate, and then we're working through the target of the solved camera, and the target is the red circle, because that allows us to create objects, text, cameras and solids that will all become part of the solved scene. So it's a very kind of I suppose a foolproof way of making sure that your masks are going to line up with the movement of the camera, your text is going to line up with the movement of the camera, and if you wanted to add more text, for example, after that, then again just go back to your 3 points that you know work and create text, and then you can just keep working with multiple objects as you go. Right, and that's pretty much it. So